Okay, so to start us off, let's hear it for our Santa Monica College Associates President, Damian Valdivia.
I think that might be the first whistles. That's pretty good. Paul, you didn't get those. Good evening, everybody. Like Yao said, my name is Damian Valdivia, and I'm the new president of the Santa Monica College Associates. And I'd like to officially welcome you to the 34th Annual Associates Kick-Off event. In opening, I'd like to recognize some dignitaries that we have in attendance today. One who will be giving a somewhat of a talk, our Santa Monica City Mayor, Kevin McEwen.
I don't know that it's much of a talk, and I've promised to resist the temptation to tell memory jokes, because I understand everybody's already been doing that. I'm not even going to try to one-up you. I just want to observe, though, that Santa Monica is one city, but it's a city made of many communities. And that's one of our great strengths. And it's on nights like tonight where we see those different communities come together. With the college, with RAND, our school district, we from the city, residents involved in other parts of the life in this community. We realize what a rich fabric this is that we have in our city, and how lucky we are to have so many communities that come together to form our one city. So I want to welcome you to our one city of Santa Monica tonight. Welcome.
Thank you, Kevin. I'd also like to introduce a Santa Monica Malibu Unified School Board member, Dr. Richard Talvadarian Joshwin. I hope Jeswin. Come on. All right. So why are we here tonight? A lot of questions, Paul. I'm assuming some of it's for the free food, free wine, place by the beach. Who could beat that on a Wednesday night? Thank you, Eddie. Well, I think you're here because my wife buys a lot of jewelry from me. Well, I think we're really here to see colleagues, see friends, listen to two outstanding speakers this evening on the science of memory. But most importantly, we're here to say thank you. Thank you to all of the continued support for those members and the associates who've continued to participate with their time, their money, and their support. And thanking the new people here who were looking to help join the associates this evening and introducing them to our program. It's a great program. It's a great legacy program here at Santa Monica College, and what we're looking to do is to enrich, inspire, and engage the students of our community. Now, I'm going to make one introduction here that I was told no baseball stories, so I'm not going to do any baseball stories, but I've known this gentleman for over 25 years. He went to high school with my family. He was my high school baseball coach, a big mentor to me while I attended SMC, and he's now the interim president of Santa Monica College. It's with great pleasure that I introduce Santa Monica College interim president, Jeff Shimizu.
Thank you, Damian. We promised we wouldn't swap baseball stories, so I'm gonna stick to that rule. Thank you to RAND for your support to Santa Monica College. I also wanted to acknowledge Dean Kirsten Elliott. Where is she at? Here she is. Here. Yeah, thank you so much, and your entire community relations team for all of your work in putting this together. Thank you so much. I'd like to take a moment to recognize our college leadership that we have here today. From our board of trustees, Vice Chair Dr. Luis Jaffe. Trustee Dr. Susan Amanoff. Trustee Dr. Nancy Greenstein. Has she made it in yet? Okay. I know she's coming over from UCLA. Trustee Barry Snell, and Trustee Dr. Andrew Walter. We also have in attendance today former Board of Trustees Dr. Nancy Cattell and Carol Curry. Also, I wanted to introduce Interim Dean Lizzie Moore. Where's Lizzie at? In the back there. Yeah. She's from the SMC Foundation. I want to thank the foundation and the associates for all of your support. Thank you very much. I wanted to acknowledge the important role that the Santa Monica College Foundation and associates play in supporting our students through their fundraising efforts. So again, thank you so much. We're fortunate to have such an active and supportive foundation. Thank you on behalf of our students, our faculty, and our staff. Thank you. And finally, I'd like to identify any SMC alumni that are in the audience today. Will you please stand or raise your hand? Again, thank you so much. Thank you so much for all of your support. Eddie, I see you in the back. Thank you so much. Yeah. So always remember, proud to be
SMC!
Thank you very much.
Keep forgetting to get up. All right. Now I'd actually like to present a gift to our outgoing president, Paul Fuller. You come on up, Paul. I wanted to thank Paul. He's done a great job over the last couple of years leading the associates, and we actually I kept trying to give him my speech, but he wouldn't take it tonight. So, but we got to when Kirsten and I were trying to figure out what to get him, the alcohol kept coming up. So we got him a little thing to fall asleep there in the back. But Paul, thank you very much for your
we
service.
We don't want to talk about my little Judy Naveau stash either, all right?
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Now I'd like to invite Yao Katagiri up to the podium. And before Yao takes the podium, I wanted to formally thank Yao and Rand for continuously supporting the associates. I think this is, I don't even know how many years we've had it here, but it's a great event. They do a great job for us, and we really thank you for that support.
It's 10, but who's counting? Well, just a short welcome from Rand to all of you on behalf of our President and Chief Executive Officer, Michael Rich, who is an Associates member, I will have you know. And Rand has been an ambassador-level sponsor of the Associates for many, many years. We first invited this group over when we were in the old building. So we've been here now in this building for 11 years. So, and it's been just a pleasure to have the partnership between Santa Monica College and Rand refreshed year after year after year, not just with an event like this, but much more substantively and programmatically. And we're very proud of that partnership and hope that it will continue for many, many years to come. We did want to make a pitch on behalf of Rand and our 1,100 staff members here many of whom are also associates members, and I'm a personal ambassador level member and have been for many years. We really believe in the associates program because we all know that Santa Monica College is a real gem in terms of both its academic programs and its workforce training programs. But that's for the students, and it's really all about the students. But what the associates really do it's a relatively small pot of money, but it really allows us to bring to the campus, to bring to the students who are working very hard on their core courses and their core training, to really enjoy and be exposed to this much broader variety of thought leaders and very accomplished people and experts in their field who the associates funding allows us to bring to the campus. And so we're leveraging that basic excellence of Santa Monica College, but the associates are able to bring in that next layer that really allows our students to see the world out there and to enhance their own vision of what's possible for themselves if they really try and focus. And so for that reason, I personally and my institution really encourages anyone here who is not a member of the associates to please sign up for it. You don't have to be an ambassador level. You can be a very basic member, and all of those dollars really count. So, and the other reason, I will say, to be a member of the associates is because it's not about only about channeling money to the students to enhance the students' life, but all of the programs that we bring to the campus, you all as members are perfectly welcome to join us so you can enjoy the same programs that you are bringing to the students. And that in itself is really worth it. And I will tell you that just as an example of that, all of you actually tonight are participating in the film class because those cameras in the back belong to the film class, and those are the film students back there. And I will tell you, earlier this afternoon, they really had a heck of a class going. So you're all part of that. And what we'd like to do now is to show you a product of the film class. This was produced and directed and created by the Santa Monica College film class as their way and the students' way to thank you, all of you associates members, for what you enable them to do. So let's see their product.
We need your support to ensure that Santa Monica College continues to offer the high-quality education that we're known for. We offer the highest quality undergraduate and career education taught by our world-class faculty. Your return on investment in Santa Monica College is significant because our students didn't necessarily have easy access to resources and opportunity to engage in higher education. Help us inspire our students.
Thank you, Santa Monica College Associates, for supporting the Public Policy Institute and allowing us to enrich our students' lives.
This port de bras is in dedication of the Santa Monica College Associates. Thank you for sponsoring our Masters of Dance series and inspiring our students.
Being a student here at Santa Monica College has helped me a lot, especially the guest speakers here on campus. All thanks to you guys, the associates. It's very inspiring having different speakers come on campus and share their stories with us.
Thank you, Associates from Black Legions.
SMC Associates, thank you for all you do. Shokran, merci beaucoup, muchas gracias. Thank you. We could not do it without you.
Thank you, Associates.
Your support matters. Thank you.
On behalf of the SMC Film Program, we thank you.
You guys rock. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Associates, and thank you for your support.
Associates, on behalf of the college, I want to thank you for all of your support. The lecture series that you sponsor really enhances the instructional program for our faculty, and I know our students appreciate it. So once again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Associates. Thank you for supporting the film program and for making our dreams possible.
Thank you, Associates.
Tack så jättemycket. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Associates.
Gracias.
Tack så mycket.
どうもありがとう。レズテまで。谢谢。感恩。Merci.
Koppen Cup.
Bye bye.
Спасибо.
Thank you, Associates.
And finally, what we would like to do is put up a list on the screen. You know who you are, and now the rest of the people in the room will know who you are. And I'd like to ask everybody who is an ambassador level sponsor of the Associates program to please stand. Don't be bashful. Stand. Thank you all so much for your continued support. And now, here's Damien.
Can we get the heckler out of here? Yao, thank you so much for that. I think I'm going to take Yao on my next insurance sales pitch. I want to also thank the film program and SMC for the fresh new look and the thank you video. Great job. Now I'd like to introduce our main event, the Science of Memory. Before I bring out our guest speakers of the evening, I'd like to start with a brief clip to set the stage.
First, meet or refresh your memory of our original memory wizards.
A 7.1 earthquake hit the San Francisco-Oakland area on
October 17th, 1989. Tuesday. And we were watching the game of the World Series.
And when were the Oscars held? In 1999.
In 1999, Sunday, March 21st.
Yes.
They remember what they did.
I went to a fabulous Oscar party that day.
What they care about.
When was the last time the Redskins beat the Steelers?
Oh, in 91. November 17th, 1991.
Sometimes even the shoes they wore.
These I wore on April the 21st of this year, so that was a Tuesday. Oh, these shoes I got a long time ago.
It's the way most of us remember yesterday.
The first time I wore them and I got them was on April the 9th, so that was a Friday of 1982.
This is a detective story.
The scientist who first identified this condition and has been studying it ever since is Dr. James McGaugh at the University of California, Irvine. An eye condition requires him to wear a clouded lens.
Should I wait or should I go ahead and go? Okay, I think we got the gist of the memory, the science of memory. So it's my honor to introduce the following speakers for the evening. We heard one, Dr. James McGaugh. He's the founding chair of the Department of Neurobiology and Behavior and founding director of the Center for Neurobiology of Learning and Memory at the University of California, Irvine. He's a member of the National Academy of Sciences, and his many awards and honors include the Grawemeyer Award for Outstanding Psychological Research. His research investigates neurobiological processes underlying learning as well as Highly Superior Autobiographical Memory. Also, Bobby Simmons serves as an Associate Faculty in Communications and Media Studies at Santa Monica College. And Bob Petrella is one of only 50 people in the world diagnosed with Highly Superior Autobiographical Memory. Give him any date from the past 45 years, and most likely he can remember what he was doing on that day or some world or national event that occurred around that time. He has been featured on 60 Minutes 3 times, Nightline, and The View, and can teach people the secrets of improving their memory. According to medical researchers, the potential to store information appears infinite. While Bob hasn't reached infinity, he can definitely help a person increase their memory power with several innovative techniques he has created on his own. An ex-stand-up comedian, he is now a producer and writer of such TV shows as The Deadliest Catch and Modern Marvels. His most recent production is Jay Leno's Garage, debuting on CNBC in October. Please help me welcome our guest speakers.
Thank you. Oh, they want us together. Before we...
There we go. Thank you. Thank you.
So I'm the least talented one up here, so I'm the moderator. I only teach at SMC. But thank you all for coming. Thanks for having us. It's a lot of fun to see you all here. I'm going to start by just asking Dr. McGaugh a couple of questions about the field. So, what is neurobiology? What is the field kind of comprised of? How do you, for example, differentiate your field from other fields that might be related, like psychology or medical science?
Well, neurobiology focuses on the brain, the understanding of how the brain works. And it's part of our body, and its function is to make us who we are. So it interfaces with medicine, it interfaces with classical biology, and it interfaces with psychology, because after all, psychology is about what we do, and neurobiology is the field that is trying to explain why it is that we do what we do. So that's what I'm interested in and what I do.
From what I understand, it's a very interdisciplinary subject. Was there such a study of this when you were in college, or did you study something else and then migrate into it?
That's a complicated, and for me at least, interesting question.
Please.
No, it didn't exist. And I say here's a little bit of selling, I guess. At UCI, I was the founding chair of the first department in the world ever to focus exclusively on the neurobiological basis of behavior. And now there are many of them, and most universities have programs in which they bring together people from various departments to do that. No, I started as an undergraduate major in drama and music. Truth in advertising, I played 3 concerts just last week, a jazz concert, a swing band concert, and a large concert band concert just last week. So I kept up with the music as a side, and you're the only people I'm telling that about. Back home, I don't let them know that I do that. But during the course of college, and this is the nice thing about a college, by the way, it doesn't really make any difference what you say you're going to study. Go to college and learn something. You get your mind expanded. You learn about things that you didn't know about before. When you go to college and you say have a major in doing something, you have incomplete knowledge about the world, incomplete knowledge about scholarship. And I had incomplete knowledge. I still have incomplete knowledge. We all do. We all have incomplete knowledge. But during the course of this, I didn't lose interest in music and drama. That didn't go away, but I had my mind expanded because I learned about investigations of behavior. At that time, it was psychology, and it was called, at that time, physiological psychology. That is psychology, but looking at the physiological basis of it. And that sort of seduced me away then from what I said I was going to do and moved me into the interest that I've had ever since. So that was my pathway.
Okay. Since we walked in during the Viagra portion, I only know from stories what that's about, but I don't know how much of the video you saw. So the phenomenon, which is sometimes called hyperthymesia or highly superior autobiographical memory, tell us a bit about that and how you came to understand that and discover it.
All right. Let me give a little background here. I have always, in my research career, from the time I was a graduate student, been interested in memory because it's our most important ability. Of all the things that we do, everything rests on memory. If you didn't have memory, you wouldn't be here. If you didn't have memory, you wouldn't be. You would not have existed. Every animal that exists has memory, and it's useful because you learn where the bad things are and the good things are and where the food is and so on. It's just essential for survival. All right, so that's the beginning of this. The brain is the most complicated structure in the known universe. There's nothing that comes close to the complexity. You put those together, and that expresses my interest in understanding this very complicated structure and how it does memory. And I worked on that all my life. All my scientific life has been based on that. So one day I got an email from a woman who said, I have a memory problem and I would like your advice. I'd like to meet you and talk with you. Well, what would you think if somebody said, I have a memory problem, I'd like some help, right? You may have said that yourself. You know? Well, I said, well, this is not a clinic. This is a research institute. We study memory, but I can direct you to a clinic where you might get some help. And she said, no, that's not my problem. My problem is that I don't forget. And I thought you might find that interesting. Here I've been working on memory, you know, on the one hand, all my life, and somebody says, I don't forget. So I said, all right, I'll meet with you. But I have to tell you the truth. I met on a Saturday. Somehow that was not my regular work day, and it's sort of like it's the kind of thing you do on a weekend, you know, not on your regular job. So she came, and this was in 2000, which was, you'll recall, the millennium, right? And at the millennium, books were published that had a report of everything that happened for the last 100 years. Some of you may have such a book. I got one for Christmas, and that thing was sitting on my desk. So when she came, I opened up this book and I just sort of randomly looked through at dates for which she would have been alive. You know, had to stick with those. And I said, what happens on this particular date? Now, I picked items that would have been headlines or CNN or maybe Fox News. But, yeah.
We were watching the debate in the green room, so we're a little excited.
Strike that. It would have been CNN or it would have been a headline, and I would say, what happened on this day? And she would rather blithely tell me. Or I would say, here's an event. Tell me when this happened. And she would tell me. Now this is for notable events, things that everybody in our culture would have been exposed to. It would have been ridiculous if I asked her something that she'd never been exposed to because she couldn't have a memory of it, right? So I did that, and she did very well. We continued the inquiry for weeks and months, and then she told us one day, I put a group together at that point to study this, graduate students, postdocs, undergraduates, and so on. And then she told us, oh, by the way, I've always kept a diary. A diary? Well, look what that did for us. We could then get hold of the diary and ask her questions about her personal life, which we could validate. Mm-hmm. You see, because if I asked her, what did you do on June 3rd, 1972? And she said, I had a fight with my boyfriend. Oh, so what? How would I know that? I wasn't there, right? But if it's in the book, I could check it and see. And we did that with a large number of questions, and it turned out that she could tell us what she did on almost any day of her life since she was about 13 years old. I also, at one point, asked her to tell me the dates of the last 20 Easters. Think about it. How many of you remember the date of the last Easter? All right.
She was Jewish too.
Even more challenging.
Still in my line. Well, so she was Jewish and she couldn't do it. Is that what you want to tell me? Right? No, that's right.
We're on thin ice. So
Not only did she tell me the dates, of course she told me the day also. You could all do that. I'm waiting for the laugh on that. You know? She told me the dates, but she also told me what she did on each of those days, and I didn't even ask her to do that. It was the date and the day, and here's what she did. So we gradually began to be believers about this. Now let me give you a little perspective on this. In science, and many of you may be scientists or know about science, you start with a hypothesis that nothing is true. That's the scientific perspective, and it's called the null hypothesis. I may say that I really believe that something works this way, but in science you say, I believe that it does not, and now I have to get data which will convince me otherwise. That's the way all of science works. You have to validate your finding against the hypothesis that is not true, right? So that's the attitude that we took toward her, is that it was not true, and gradually we began to accept that she is able to do this. Now there's no explanation here. That is, we didn't know how she's able to do this. We were simply able to say that her claim is correct, that she is able to do this. Now, she did not want to be known for this. She wanted to be very private about it, so we gave her some fake initials. We called her AJ, which had nothing to do with her name. Later, she revealed and wrote a book, The Woman Who Can't Forget, and everybody now knows her to be Jill Price. And you can read the book and learn all about it. But AJ wanted to be private, and but it began to leak out. We're on NPR, National Public Radio interview, and a few more people wrote in to us. And then we were more readily exposed by publicity, and subjects began to come to us to claim that they had the ability. I'll get to you in just a minute. Hang on. I'm going to come back to that. I'll just say briefly, the big change in the number of subjects came in December 19th, 2010, which was a Sunday. I can do that. We were on 60 Minutes, which of course is always on a Sunday. That part is easy. And I did not see the program. I was at a Christmas musical that evening, and I came back and turned on my computer, and I had about 600 emails that had been sent to me in the hour since the TV program was shown, and I spent the time between Christmas and New Year's answering each and every one of them, not because I'm good-hearted and not because it was the holiday season, but because I thought it might generate some subjects, and it did. It generated a lot. Now, in the middle of all of this, I have to go back. I got word that Bob Petrella would like to meet us, and he had contacted the first author on the paper that we published in 2006, Betsy Parker, and he contacted her, and she redirected him to me and a colleague, and we met. So when did we meet?
June 28th, 2008.
And what day of the week?
Saturday. Yeah.
And where did we meet?
Panera Bread in Huntington Beach.
And what did you order?
I ordered a muffin and a coffee, which you paid for.
I'm sorry. You owe me for that now.
Sorry. I don't read minds.
Some of these things are helpful.
Oh, God. Here we go. Well, okay, so that gives us a good way to talk about Bob. So, Bob, tell us about yourself. Where do you hail from, and what was going on in your life when you began to realize that you had this extraordinary memory?
Well, I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, outside of home. Pittsburgh people.
Steelers.
And when I was in high school, I always could remember what I did on certain days, but I didn't think it was that unusual, because I remember on my 9th birthday thinking what I did on my 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th birthday, who I was with, what day of the week it was, and stuff like that. And then I got interested in sports and following sports. Of course, sports is a lot of numbers and dates and figures, and so I just thought it was, and I always liked history, so I thought it revolved around that. Then when I got into high school and I'd mention a date or some event that happened with some of my childhood buddies, I'd say, I'll mention what it was, and they'll go, well, I don't remember. I said, yeah, you remember, it was November 3rd. And what? I said, yeah, it was a Friday. And they just kind of look at me. And then that's when I kind of realized that not everybody does this, and not everybody has a memory like that. And so that went on for years. And then, and it became kind of a parlor or a party game or a trick, or someone would say, he can tell you, if I could remember, if I was, within my lifetime, maybe kids' birthdays or somebody's birthday or their wedding anniversary or whatever. And then finally in 2007, when I was working on Deadly Sketch, it became, again, like a game at work where people would go, hey, come here. And if they were young enough, he can tell you the day of the week you were born on and what was going on in that day. So finally, and people always said this, well, what should you do this? What can you do with this? I said, I don't know. So my boss suggested, why don't you find the science behind this? So I got online, and I was in the TV business then as I am now, and I did kind of a third-person Google search. I just Googled memory doctors and came up with 3 different names. And I wrote to them in the third person saying, hi, I'm a TV producer. We have this guy, remember, because I didn't know how rare it was or whether it was that much of a phenomenon or whatever. So I said, I know someone who can remember every day of the week or every day of his life for the last 40 years. How rare is this? Is this worth doing a TV segment on it? And 2 people got back to me, and they recommended Dr. McGaugh's. This was right after the paper had come out, and we still didn't know Jill Price's name. And so that led me to the UC Irvine studying to the folks there.
I'd like to say something about that. Bob's ability and the ability of people like him, we identify because we ask about events and about dates. Now, plenty of our subjects, and we now have many hundreds of the subject, plenty of our people who fail on this say, well, that's not the way my memory works. I remember what I was doing and so on, but I don't date it. So I just want to say, somewhere in this meeting, I want to say, there may be people who have another form of strong memory in which they don't date events. But we can't study those people because we need to know that they can remember what happened at a particular time. And if they claim, oh, I just remembered that something happened, we have no way of validating it. So I don't want to claim that there are not such people. I want to claim that it is very difficult to try to figure out how such people would be studied, and we haven't figured that out. So we restrict ours to people who have the ability. I also want to say that when we first studied AJ, or Jill Price, we learned, I guess to my surprise, that this had never been studied before in history. There was not a single scientific study ever in the history of science of an individual like that. And that rather surprised me, because when she came to me, I thought I could look in the literature and find out what people have learned about individuals like this, and they'd never been studied. So these people, including Bob Petrella, are the very first people in the world, ever in the history of the world, who have this ability and who have agreed to be investigated scientifically. And we're really those of us who work in memory are really grateful to them for their coming to us and for letting us figure out what's going on with their memories.
It's interesting because in the clip that I was hoping that you would see, you talk about in the 60 Minutes piece that you're detectives, and in this case, it is like, I study film. This is like a story where someone comes into the detective with a problem. I can't forget things, and so the phenomenon sort of found you. You were the memory expert, and the people with the condition were trying to find some answers to their questions, and they found you. Normally, you'd think you'd be looking for it out in the field, but it didn't exist. So you had to kind of create this field.
Yes, and it's interesting when we published the first paper, the husband of a woman who was a co-author on the papers, it was Greek, and so in discussing it, he suggested that you give it a Greek name. So what is the Greek name? He said, well, hyperthymesia, because that means just strong memory. And so we said, okay, we'll call it hyperthymesia. But the problem with that is when you name it, it sounds as though you know something about it. Oh, he's got hyperthymesia. Clearly, did you give a blood test for it? So after a couple of years of this, I said, we made a very, very serious mistake, because when you name it with something like that, people think that you understand it and you classified it. So, no, all we have is Bob Petrella has highly superior autobiographical memory. Highly superior, meaning it's 1 in roughly 30 million, or let's say 1 in 15 million, something like that in the United States. Well, look at it this way. On this program, which was on December 19th, 2010 on a Sunday, 19.5 million people watched that program. That program was aired again, and I think it was 11 million people watched it a second time. Now, some of them might have seen it before, so if you subtract half of it, that's 25 million. Then we were all in another program that about 10 million people watched at a very different time, so maybe at least half of those hadn't seen anything before at all. So you add it all up, and that means that 10% of the population of the United States knew about that. And furthermore, since a lot of those who watched it were children, and exclude them, that's a very high percentage of the adults in the United States saw these programs. And out of that, we have 50 verified people who have this ability. It's very rare, extremely rare.
How many in the audience saw one of the pieces on 60 Minutes? There were 3 of them. And one of them, if you didn't know, one of them we taped at SMC, the last one, which if you haven't seen it, it's called Hoop Dreams. It's really good. Check that one out. Now, as the lay person up there, I'll tell you a bit of my experience with this. I met Bob at a bar, Steelers bar, watching the Steelers, and sat behind him for a couple of years before we began to talk and stuff. And I knew him as just a guy at a bar. I would high five and whatnot and hug, during touchdowns and whatnot. And years went by before I had any indication that his memory was different from mine, except for he would send these emails out that would use the Steelers players' jersey numbers as like some kind of mnemonic game, like Ben Roethlisberger's 7 days until whatever happens. I thought, oh, that's cute. And then one day I got invited to his birthday, and I went, and someone said, hey, Bob, do everyone's birthday. And he went around the room to 50 people, and he gave everyone's birthday, the year they were born, and the day of the week that it was that year. And I was just like, who is this guy? Like, who is he? I was totally flabbergasted. So he, operates like a normal person. You wouldn't know necessarily that he is one of this super small, group of people, but there it is. So, I already know he knows the answer to this, but what day was I born? You can give the year. We're all friends.
Oh, okay. November 8th, 68.
And what were you doing that day? Oh, what day of the week was it?
That was a Friday.
And what were you doing?
I was at a football game. I was in high school. Oh, no, I graduated from high school, but I went to our hometown high school's football game, Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania, where Joan Ann is from.
Yeah.
And they lost the Hopewell 28-7, I believe.
Yeah. Who were you with at the game?
I was with 2 guys who were still in high school, Eddie Compa and Jerry Lombard.
They're still in high school now? It's a pretty bad school.
They're pretty slow.
Yeah.
They're pretty slow in
Okay.
the falls.
Well, tell them to come to SMC. We'll get them straightened out. So, it was kind of a miracle for me. And then I sort of watched Bob go through this and was involved in some of these pieces that were on the air. So I've kind of watched him go through all this stuff, and now all this attention has come. So what was it like meeting other people who had the same memory? You went all this time not really having it in common with anybody. And then what was it like to meet the other, people in the study?
When was that?
That was Pearl Harbor Day, December 7th, 2009. We taped it took a year for that piece to air. We kept waiting and waiting because it was a two-parter, so it's hard for them to slot in. Finally, they aired it after a year after they did it. But I was a little leery somewhat because I didn't know, well, are we all going to try and top each other? We're going to try and be envious. But everyone was very friendly, and when we greeted each other, there was a camaraderie, and not saying that we're at that level of prestige, but when you see the ex-presidents together, like the Clinton and the two Bushes and Jimmy Carter, and years ago Reagan and Nixon, if you see them like it's somebody's opening of their library, there's always this, you see that they just love being around each other because I think they know they've experienced something that nobody else has experienced, the job as President of the United States. And so I kind of related it to that, is that we know how this works. Now, we can explain it to people, and I think most people will understand, particularly if you see the 60 Minutes pieces, but you don't really realize how it works. And so there was that connection right away. And I still can't keep in touch with not only the ones who were on that, but also the ones who were on the second piece as well, who I hadn't met in person, but they, got a hold of me. And
Okay, we're pretty hopeless. That's pretty clear. But give it a shot. Tell us how it works.
Well, you would be able to explain it. What it is as far as how it works or why it works, I'm not sure. How it works is it's kind of similar when someone throws out a date. It'll be like if you're on your computer and you enter a URL address. And so you say you enter you start to enter SMC. Well, all the SMCs that you ever entered start. And so when someone says July, I start immediately in my brain, I start filtering all the Julys. I remember 23rd, then I start, filtering all those. In 1960, okay, I'm down to 10 dates, and then it's kind of like Google Maps, and then it focuses in on the one day.
See?
No big deal. Isn't that what you guys do when you have a memory?
Well,
no?
Thank you all very much for coming. I'll explain.
So there's many questions that we could ask to participants, and I don't want to expose you too much, Bob. But tell us what the Book of Bob is.
The Book of Bob was...
Which, by the way, the acronym is BOB. You like that? Nice marketing. Yeah. He's slick. Penn State. Yeah.
I had never written, unlike AJ, I had never written any of these dates down. I got something in my throat for something.
You want some water?
I got some. I had never written any of this down. I always just had it in my head. And I was driving around one Saturday night. It was January 30th, 1999. And I thought about two things that had happened, among other ones, but there were two kind of things that were somewhat indelible in 83 and 88. And I thought the millennium was coming up. This was 99. And I thought, why don't I choose my most memorable of each date of the week? So most memorable January 1st, most memorable for myself, most memorable January 2nd, all through most memorable Easter, most memorable Super Bowl, Thanksgiving, etc. So I was working in Sherman Oaks at the time, living in Culver City. So I would drive, as I was driving home each night, I would go through, if it was like, say, September 16th, I would go through all the September 16th that I would remember and then choose my most memorable. And what I did was I wrote all of them down, and I didn't write the event down. I just wrote 65, 71, 78, 79. I just wrote the year down because I knew I would remember what I did on that exact date. And then I choose the most memorable for that date. Most memorable September 16th is 99.
Wait, this isn't the most memorable September 16th? Okay, we're working on it. So what's the most memorable one? September 16th.
Yeah, I had gotten the first hour-long show I had ever written was called on casino technology, and we had gotten I was supposed to be the associate producer on it, but they made me the writer on it. And it was a real short turnaround. And we were in Vegas. We went to the Vegas Gaming Commission. And we were just, it was like a 12, 14-hour shoot day. And we went to, we were at the Flamingo, and we were at the Phoenician. And it was just one of those real hectic days. And we interviewed, most of you probably remember a guy named Marty Allen. He was a comedian, Rossi and Allen. But he was just, he always seemed like a sweet guy, on the screen. But he was not like that, let's just say. He wasn't like that. He kind of was we were interviewing the head of the Vegas Historical Society, and he was interrupting. So, no, that wasn't true. He had this real high-pitched voice. No, that wasn't true, and stuff like that. So, and then that night I couldn't get to sleep, and I remember I took 2 Salmonexes, and I still couldn't get to sleep.
What was your second most memorable September 16th?
That would be in 1971. It was my last day of work at when I was working in the community mental health center. And we had a party afterwards, and then I went up. I finished my senior year up at Penn State.
So I know something of Dr. McGaugh's work, but what can you tell us about how these people can do this, and what does that tell you about the rest of us who can't so easily remember our last names or where we are, those kinds of things?
Well, let me start by telling you how we tried to find out what procedures did we use. So we asked these subjects to come to the laboratory, and we tested them in lots of different ways. Gave them stories to read, and then tested them after reading the stories, and had a typical psychological work, learning nonsense syllables and associating names with faces, all the kinds of things that you can do in a laboratory. The answer to that was that looking carefully at their ability to do this, it turns out that they're just like us. So this ability adds no advantage to the standard kinds of things that you and I do and learn. It just has no advantage at all. These people do not have what people think of as photographic memory, but no one in the world has photographic memory anyway, so you can, I know the term is out there, but it doesn't exist. They can't look at a page and report verbatim what is on the page. They do just what we do. They get the general ideas and report the general ideas back. So a lot of what we learned was negative. That is, we learned it's not like this, it's not like this, it's not like that, it's not like that. It's a special ability. So the more we studied it, the more we understood that it is a special ability. It's not a supreme ability to learn or a supreme ability to remember. It is a supreme ability to remember one's personal experiences and time tag it. That's what it is. So a lot of the research was that kind of characterization. We also learned that in some ways we are just like them. For example, when our subjects are tested a day after they experience life, imagine tomorrow. If I tested all of you tomorrow about tonight, our subjects would do as well as you do about tomorrow within 24 hours on testing. No better, no better. A week later, we start to forget, and they don't forget. And a year later, you've completely forgotten that you were even here in the evening, and they don't forget, or they forget very slowly. So the second most important thing was that although they are very good at time tagging these personal experiences, we are too, just like that, for a period of time, and then we lose the ability and they don't. So that's another important thing that we learned. It's not as though they are always better than we are. They're no better for one day, and then we get worse and worse and worse over time. So that's another finding. We learned something else, and maybe you can speak to this, Bob. We learned that all of them are to some degree, more or less, obsessive compulsive. All of the subjects are. And this takes the form of a germ avoidance. It takes the form of excessive orderliness and all of the things that you think of. Now, this is not at the clinical level. You probably would not even notice it until you paid specific attention to them. But on the edge, all of them are more obsessive, compulsive than our age and sex match controls that we have. We always have control subjects for every study that we do, and the control subjects are the same age range, and same distribution of sex and so on. And so obsessive compulsiveness is a feature of our subjects that we need to take into consideration. We also scanned the brains of 11 of our subjects using MRI as brain scanning. And in comparison with subjects matched for age and sex, we found 11 regions of the brains that differed. But they didn't differ in any truly informative way. They differed in a descriptive way. Some regions were different in size, some regions were different in shape, and some regions gave evidence of greater conductivity, that is, fiber pathway conductivity. And so that was the beginning of exploration of the brain. And now my colleagues at UC Irvine are going to expand this with more studies of the imaging, including functional imaging, putting the brains to work on memory tasks to see what the brains look like when they're working, but that has not been done yet. That's just research that is planned. So the long shot is that this is Sherlock Holmes' work. That is, this is something that appeared, and now we're trying to figure out what happened. It's backwards. This is something that is there, and we're trying to figure out how it got there. Now, in most of my research for 50 years, I put the memories in. That is, I did a huge number of studies with laboratory animals and with human subjects, investigating the processes involved when memories are formed. But I was in charge. You know, that's experimentalists. That's what you do. You get this treatment, you get this treatment, you get this treatment, and then I look at the difference, then I publish. This is not like that. These subjects appeared with this ability, and our task was trying to figure out how it works and what caused it. And this is not an easy task. Now, let me tell you something about that. There are other individuals who have extraordinary ability, absolutely extraordinary ability. You may have seen the video of the young man who was flown over Rome in a helicopter, and then he went back and he drew the rooftops of Rome, and just micro detail. All he did was take one look and do that. You may know about the very, very, very famous American Indian sculptor who sculpts horses, who sell in New York for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and he sculpts them without even looking at horses. There's no horse to look at, he just does it, and he's autistic. We don't know anything about what goes on in the brains of these people that enables them to do these wonderful things. There was nothing. And as far as I know, there's no scientific investigation of these people to try to find that out. Now, my point here is that there is a variety of special memory abilities. I mean, of course, if you fly over Rome and take a look at it and go back and draw it, that's a memory ability. Never been studied. It's a different kind of memory. In order to figure out how memory works, we need to know answers to all of the above. All of the above. All of these special memory abilities, not just your ability, not just my ability, but these special memories. Now, why the special memories? Because if we can figure that out, we'll learn what it is that the brain is truly capable of, and we'll learn why it is that we are not capable of that. Is it the case that there is some magical difference in Bob's brain or the brain of this young man flown over Rome? Is there something there? Or is it that the brain is communicating, the different regions of the brain are communicating in different ways? For example, in the case of this autistic person flown over Rome, maybe parts of his brain are left alone and don't communicate with the rest of the brain so that it can have a special technique. You see, it can do this, but not the other stuff. And our problem is we can do everything, you see. Now, what I can't figure out is that Bob Petrella and 49 other people have this special ability, and it doesn't seem to have compromised them in any way. That is, they're not autistic. This is an add-on for them, and that's what makes it so interesting and so difficult to understand.
Now, let me ask Bob this question, and forgive me if it's a bit personal, but obviously, having never been anybody else, you don't know. But are there any? I don't know that for a fact. I cannot prove that Bob Petrella has never been anybody else. But what are the sort of ramifications of being able to recall all of these things from your life? For example, do you have the emotions associated with those experiences at the ready as well, or just a picture of what happened or details about it? What all comes up when you recall a day?
It's all parts of that, and it's very emotionally driven, which I think it is for a lot of the 8-Sammers. That's I call them anyway. But I can remember, the very good and very, well, I guess like most people, the very good and very bad days I can remember much more easily than, the mundane days. The only thing is, I think like 8-Sammers, and most people might remember a couple of days of the year, and we're remembering 200 or 300 of them. That's the difference. And I think people always ask, is it an advantage or a disadvantage? And for me, anyway, I think it's more of an advantage. It's very helpful in relationships with particularly friends and family, relatives, where I'm going to remember like everybody's birthday. I don't need a Facebook reminder for somebody's birthday or anniversaries as well. So it's just stuff like that.
Well, also, what's my anniversary?
It's that's weird. The day, June 28th, 2014.
That's my wife's birthday.
Oh, no.
What the hell? Are you talking to my wife? What the hell?
It's May 24th.
Man.
Yeah, it's
May 24th. That's right.
I was thinking of the June 28th. That's weird because that is your wife's birthday.
That is my wife's
That's the day
birthday.
that I met you.
Oh.
And that's kind of that.
What year was
It
that?
was May 24th, 2014.
What was the year that we met?
2008.
2008.
But Bob has other anniversaries as well. So what's the anniversary of our buying your TV?
My TV?
Yeah.
Oh, that was February 12th, 2011, because it was 6 days after the Steelers had lost the Super Bowl to Green Bay. Because we were at the Best Buy over on Sawtell and Pico, and I remember the reason I remember that is because they were showing the replay of the game. They had it up on all the screens.
That's miserable.
As we're looking at the game, we go, oh, this is what we got to look at.
Yeah. So he'll text me or email me with anniversaries, and not just when I got married, but moments that we've had together. And for me, I don't. Or he'll say, remember that time that the Steelers did this? And I'm like, I just kind of nod. I don't remember really any of it. But there's other things too, and I do want to take questions. But before we take questions, I want to reveal Bob a bit more. So we went through the whole process of shooting a 60 Minutes piece, and then he did another one. And then, but there was something about Bob's memory that he had not shared with Dr. McGaugh, and he had not shared with the 60 Minutes producers, that he had shared with me, and that was Holland College. How many of you have seen the piece about Holland College? Nobody. That's the one we shot at SMC. So tell us about Holland College. What can you tell us about Holland College?
Well, when I was a kid, when I was 12 years old, and my local high school team had won like 23 straight football games in a row. Joe Namath was the quarterback for one season. They hadn't lost since I had been following them in parts of 3 seasons. And when they lost, I felt like a part of me had been taken away from me when they finally lost. And so the week after, I started an imaginary high school football team. And the name of my high school is Beaver Falls Tigers, and I made it a parallel that it was Eastern Pennsylvania, 40 miles northwest of Philly, rather than my hometown, 40 miles northwest of Pittsburgh. And I called it Tiger Town. And the name of our college in Beaver Falls is Geneva College. And I was, keep in mind, I was 13 years old a year later. And I thought, well, what sounds good in what in Europe, Geneva, Switzerland, what in Europe sounds good. Well, Holland has a good ring to it. So I started at Holland College, and I created all these names and different players, and I would play the games in my basement. And then years later, it shows I never grew up. I kept doing it, and he called me up once on the phone, and we were talking, and I was out of breath. He goes, well, you know, I'm playing Holland College, and so I was playing the games. And so through the years, I've had all these. Every year there's not five new starters, but you know, there's probably about 250 different characters that I created over the years. And when we were filming, after we were done with the first 60 Minutes piece, he mentioned it to the 60 Minutes producers, and they always wanted to do something on it.
He's not saying the great part. So I took them aside. Did you mention Holland College? They said, what's that? I said, well, ever since 1960, what year did you, 63?
63, 64.
Bob,
Which is at our 50th anniversary.
Yeah, Bob has been fielding an imaginary basketball team and having them play a full schedule of games against real and imaginary opponents. And then eyes like, whoop, like just like, you know, and like he's been doing what? I'm like, yeah, and he has names and bios, and he follows the characters, you know, from often being recruited through their college career and then after into the pros until they die, you know. And so he will send me emails with updates about players' lives.
They're press releases.
Yeah, press releases. And you know, as a media scholar, it's great. Like it's all about like the press coverage and whatnot. And he'll say, yeah, you know, Jerry so-and-so, a member of 65 team, had his foot amputated because he has diabetes, and you know, like stuff happens to them that's real, and when he kills them, it's heartbreaking because that's my favorite player. I've been watching that guy for years in my mind, and so this very robust and real place exists in Bob's mind, and he keeps feeding it characters and experiences. And so finally 60 Minutes found a way to, like, because how do you do a news story about a fictional world in someone's head? But they figured out a way to do it, and they did come to SMC to shoot it. So check that one out. It's called Hoop Dreams. But part of it is, how can somebody, you know, conjure up and hold on to not just the experiences of their lives, but these ones that he's, you know, sort of created. So what finding out about Holland College, what was that like for you?
When my sister was about 5 years old, she had an imaginary playmate. And my mother had to set the table for her with the imaginary playmate, also had to get food and drink and so on. So what Bob had was just a bunch of imaginary playmates that he established, but he didn't give it up, you see.
Tried to.
My sister quit it when she was 7, you see. But what is interesting about this is not that he did it. I mean, we all have a fantasy life of some kind, and this happened, we think about doing that and so on. But he systematized it. That's what's so interesting about it. 2 things. He systematized it, and he remembers it. Now, we could all do that. You could all right now say, well, I'm going to have an imaginary bridge group, or I'm going to have an imaginary bowling team, or I'm going to have an imaginary hiking group or something. And you could create that right now, and you could invent some imaginary friends. Everyone is capable of doing that. You all can do it. I can do it. But how many of you would remember the names that you gave your imaginary group a week later? You know, I could give you the task. You could do this in your class. You could do it as an experiment in class. You say, everybody has to have 5 imaginary friends, and you're going to spend an hour thinking about all the things that you do. And then a month later, you give them a surprise test and say, can any of you remember what you did or what the names of them are? And the answer is going to be no, right?
Well, in the piece, he had interviewed me. They shot us in May of last year, and he asked me around 10 questions or so about different years and different players. And then 6 months later, when they did it in October, he asked, it's the same exact questions.
But it was a discussion. That is, did you know at the time?
No, I didn't know at the time.
The first one, I said, I want to learn about this, Bob. You know, what happened in 1978? What was the team like? You know, I'm just curious about that. So I asked him lots of stuff about it, and he told me all about the team. Well, 6 months later, I asked him the same questions again. And so we could find out whether he's just making it up on the spot the first time around. No. When I asked him the second time, I got the same answers about them. So this is information that he carried with him. So if you made up your imaginary group that you have this playtime with, and I ask you now, would you remember 6 months later the names of them and all of that? No, the answer is no, you would not.
And I remember getting annoyed. I goes, well, why are we doing? You asked me this.
But it was
filming this again.
It was 6
Tuesday.
months ago.
Yeah, I was getting annoyed because I said, why? And because as a producer, I was thinking about them, and I said, why are they asking me the same stuff? We already filmed this.
Yeah. Well, they're.
Why didn't you come up with new? I was thinking that to myself. Why didn't they come up with new questions?
I was charged to do that. That's what the producers wanted me to do, so I did it. And all of this was done in a casual conversation mode. It was not a testing with me like this. It was, talk about this and about that and about that and so on. And then you could put it together and see that the story held up. But now what's the value of this is that he's actually remembering. He's actually remembering. He's not making up a new group of people and new names and so on. So since the time that he was 13, was it when you started 13, until now?
January 3rd, 64.
December 19th, 2010. I can match you on that.
It's the only one you've got, though. So
he's maintained the story, elaborated on it. I think it's wonderful that it's a sports team because the members change all the time. If it was the same group, I said, I started a hiking group when I was 13, and I've hiked with the same group of people every year since. You would say that's boring because, of course, you know them. Of course, you can remember. Remembers all the names of all of the players he ever had, all the coaches, including ones he had to fire, and all of that. And it's a story. It's a story, and it's phenomenal.
I want to make sure that people in the audience get to ask questions, so please. Yeah.
As an amateur in the field, it appeared to me that the process of memory involves imprinting, retaining, and recalling. And you said that people with HSAM seem to, in the short term, have the same memory we do. It's the long term. So the retention seems to be key. You also mentioned that the people that you've studied uniformly have some degree of obsessive compulsive behavior, which suggests to me that maybe they roll things over in their minds more than we do. Could they be rolling those memories over repetitively enough to cause the retention? Could repetition be the mother of retention?
Very, very good question. Now let me give you a simple-minded answer first and then a deeper one. A simple-minded one is that it is unreasonable and unrealistic to imagine that they explicitly rehearsed all of their experiences. And let me give you an example, not from Bob, but from another subject. Another subject, I asked, do you know who Bing Crosby was? And this person said yes. And I said, what happened to Bing Crosby? And this person said, well, Bing Crosby died on a golf course in Spain, and gave me the date and the day. And I said, how did you know that? And the person said, well, my mother was driving me to a soccer game and the news came on over the radio. All right? What are the odds that this person then would systematically rehearse that little piece of information? I think very low. Had no value, didn't care about Bing Crosby, was a different era, and so on. So in terms of explicit rehearsing, the way that you would memorize a poem or some kind of trying to remember your password or something like that, I think we can rule that out because it's very hard to imagine why anyone would go around rehearsing every single event of life and rehearsing it again and again and again. Now, on the other hand, there may be a little bit of rehearsing. It's not going to explain everything, but to the extent that it is rehearsing, it's more likely to be rehearsing that the brain does automatically that's not under our control. Let me give you why I think that is a possibility. We have all had the experience of tip-of-the-tongue memory, where you try to remember something and you can't remember it. Now, lo and behold, about half an hour later, it pops into your head and you remember it. It isn't that you're repeatedly trying to remember it. No, the brain did it on its own. You set it in motion, and a half an hour later, the brain said, I found it. Right? So it is completely reasonable for me to imagine that we have rehearsal processes in our brain that are automatic, that would do the job over which we don't have any control. So it's not explicit rehearsal, but setting it in motion, the brain may just go on its own and do that. And this is one reason that we're doing the brain imaging, because with fMRI, we will be studying the brains of these subjects who have just learned something to see if the pattern of activity after they learn is different in them than it is in us. So those are, you should have been part of our research team, because yeah, what are you doing next week? Because those are the very questions that keep us awake.
There's two sides of that for me. One is the non-rehearsed was when they quizzed us, again, they would give us dates and events to verify all the 8 Sammers. They would name a date, they would give us a date, would have to name the event, or vice versa. The name the event would have to give the date. And these were dates that I haven't, or events I hadn't thought about in years, but I was getting them instantly, like most of the 8 Sammers. But then I will admit that, like, on a special day, I don't want to say special day, but I like watching the Oscars every year. So a lot of times when I'm driving home from when I watch the Oscars, I'll go back each year and think about go through each year. I've been watching them since the early 70s. So a lot of times I'll be driving home after the Oscars are over, and I'll go through each year. It's kind of a routine, or just because maybe I'm stuck in traffic, and remember, who I watched the Oscars with, what won Best Picture, where I watched it, and I'll do that maybe for the Super Bowl or July 4th or stuff like that. So in that effect, I'm not rehearsing it, but I am.
He's just given us the answer. We can all do that, right? Right now, right now, I want you to think of the Oscars of 2 years ago. Well, now come on. He can do it, why can't you? I mean, there's a certain presumption here that he doesn't worry about because he can do it. And the presumption is that you can remember the Oscar so that you can rehearse it. I mean, it's phenomenal. Think about it. He's thinking about, let me see, what happened in 2005? Oh, yeah, in the 2004? Oh, yeah, and now I'll rehearse it. Well, if you can't remember it, you can't rehearse it. Okay, how do you do it?
I don't know. It's just there. It's just there. I don't.
What about the hypothesis of explicit rehearsal? Would you give it? Do you think you do a lot of that so that it would provide a sufficient explanation of everything?
No, I think the closest thing I said is like it's after it's already happened, and I'll just do it, voluntarily, like I'll be driving home from a July 4th party, and I'll think back of all the July 4ths I could remember. And there's 2 of them I don't remember since '62, and it drives me nuts. From '62 to, I don't remember what I did in 1972, and I don't remember what I did in 1965, and it kind of...
How many of you cannot remember what you did in 1962 in the Oscars?
Now we have another question over here.
As a writer, your story about the team fascinates me. Is there drama within that team? I mean, do you have a backstory? Do you know who they married? Do you know their date in life and what they did all the way growing up? Is there a book in that?
Well, it's all in my head mostly, although I've written some of it down. But initially when I was a kid, it was just about basketball. And then as I got older in my 20s, then they became, there were sex, drugs, and rock and roll involved. And then, of course, they went on, and there's an interesting story arc with one character who died when he was in his 40s. His name was Neil Bo Jagger. He was named after 2 friends of mine, Neil and Bo, and they were Mick Jagger fans, so Neil Bo Jagger. Anyway, he had, there's a whole backstory on him that I created over the years. I don't change history with Holland College, but I'll enhance it or embellish it over the years. And initially, he was just this long-haired guy who got high before every game. He was a great passer. He's kind of a Larry Bird type, great passer, shooter, very popular with the fans. And then over the years, I started giving him a backstory of his youth and when he grew up, and his dad left the family, just up and left, and he always wanted to be. And so later on through the years, I added that story to, or added that part to his story arc of when he was at Holland, he always wanted, because being on the cover of Sports Illustrated was a lot bigger in the 70s, he always wanted to be on the cover of Sports Illustrated because he had never seen his dad since he left when he was about 6, and his dad loved sports, and he thought if he was on the cover of Sports Illustrated, that his dad would get a hold of him and go, wow, that's what my son's doing. And so, because there was no internet, you couldn't follow people as readily. But they were supposed to be on one, and the events I have in Holland mirror real-life events, and they were supposed to be on in the fall of '77. They were supposed to be on for the preview issue. They had taken the pictures of their 3 main guys, including Neil Jagger, and then Kareem Abdul-Jabbar punched Ken Benson and broke his jaw, and that was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. And that knocked them off the cover of Sports.
Those things happen.
We have another question over here.
Bob, I saw on 60 Minutes a musical savant that couldn't button his shirt. Is there anything that you find very difficult that we take for granted?
Good question.
I would say, well, I can change a light bulb, but I have problems with mechanical things. You know, I can hang a picture, but that's about as difficult as it gets. Well, when I buy something, like I had just bought a tower fan, you know, like a 4-foot tower fan, and when I get it and I go, uh-oh, there's instructions there, and I was able to put it together, but I kind of panicked because I'm not very good mechanically, so that might be one thing. So I have trouble.
Another question over here.
Hi, you have a wealth of information that you can draw on at any moment and any time. How do you find that your ability to remember helps you modify your current or future behavior?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, again, someone had asked, you know, whether I've always asked is advantage or disadvantage, and so, you know, when I think of the past is always good in 2 ways. Obviously, the good days or the great days are good because there's a warm feeling about it, and particularly, you know, as we get older and you lose people, I can think back of those days, and I think I don't know about the other 8 Sammers, but the 8 Sammers, because we embellish the experience so much, and we're so much in the moment, and remember so vividly. Like when my younger brother was dying, he died in early 2012. When I knew he wasn't going to make it in cancer, I would think back while he was living. I would think back of all these great times I had with him while he was still living, and when I was talking to him on the phone, because I wanted to experience those memories while he was still alive. And I think that's where it helps. And as far as the future, I think, you know, it's just, and then the bad things, I mentioned about the bad things, there's these warm feelings you have and people appreciate them, but the bad things you appreciate more because you go, most of the time, you look at your life and go, wow, I can't believe I did that, or wow, I'm glad I'm not going through that again. So that's where there's an appreciation of the past, because you know your life is better now. And as far as the future, again, it's kind of, you know, redundant or tried, but it's just, you know, learning from your mistakes and learning how to apply them in the future.
I think we have one or two
But
more.
Bob, Sue and I really appreciate your friendship. And Bob has alluded to us the fact that, and I thought you were going to get to it, Dr. Jim, the fact that, I'm sure it's important for a lot of people here, the implications for studying the brains and being able to address the potential to address Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah. That's a huge and important question. The incidence of Alzheimer's disease is going up simply because it is an age-related disease and we're all living longer. Children who are born today have an absolutely reasonable expectation of living to 100. But Alzheimer's disease starts at about the age of 65 and it increases by 50% every 5 years. It just marches up, and it's, as you know, extremely debilitating. So it's important to understand the nature of Alzheimer's disease. What is it? What is it that characterizes it? And surprisingly, to this day, although there's been huge effort to do it, we don't really know what causes Alzheimer's disease. There's a dominant hypothesis that there is a protein that develops in the brain, and that this damages the connections between nerve cells, damages nerve cells and their connections. But it's not known whether what is seen in the brain with Alzheimer's disease is a cause of that or a consequence of it. And there are major studies, multi-million-dollar studies going on today using antibodies to this protein, beta amyloid. The initial ones failed because it was given to people who were in their 60s or 70s, and it failed to have an effect. And then the scientists looked back and said, wait a second, this is a disease that probably started 30 or 40 years ago, slowly in development. So what we have to do is to find out who is likely to have Alzheimer's disease and treat them very early on to try to prevent it. Now, when you look at that perspective, that's not going to be an easy fix because you're looking over a very long time scale. And what scientists like to do is to look at something very quickly. You set up an experiment and you do it and you get a result and you make an interpretation. So although there are very strong hypotheses, it's not clear that we're on a target understanding. I'll just give you one example. A colleague of mine studies people who are above the age of 90. Huge major program in Irvine, but it's done in what used to be Leisure World, Laguna Woods. And what she has found is that when people die of Alzheimer's disease over the age of 90, half of them have this protein in the brain and half of them do not. When they die at the age of 90 and they are not demented, half of them have this protein in the brain and half do not. So at least for what she calls the oldest old, having this protein in the brain is not predictive of the onset of dementia. Now, unlike a lot of research in memory, the kind of understanding that's going to be required for treatment is not going to come easily because it is a slowly progressing disease. And any hypothesis that you have is going to take decades to investigate. And we're working against time. We're working against time because we can not only look at the horrific consequences of this in terms of the human being and the suffering that's going to result, but also in terms of the enormous cost that's going to accrue to countries that have many aged people. It's going to happen in Japan. It's happening now. It's going to happen in Germany because they're underproducing children. And it's going to happen in the United States and other developed countries. But it's not a problem which is going to be easily and quickly solved, but it's one of very, very high priority. Where it interfaces with this kind of research is in understanding the fundamental mechanisms that underlie memory. What is the nature of memory? What is it that we do when we say we're forming memories and we are preserving our memories? What is it that happens when you're no longer able to do that? What happens when people refer to it as a short-term memory difficulty? You've heard that. No, it's not that. It's a long-term memory difficulty. Short-term memory is usually pretty good. It's that you can't remember from day to day, and that's long-term memory. But over a few seconds or a few minutes, people can remember quite well. What is it that goes wrong in the brain that reduces or eliminates the ability to translate the recent memories that we have into longer lasting memories? And that's where the research of this kind is going to interface with that, because we're interested in the fundamental processes that underlie the making and preserving of memories. And on the other hand, we have the loss of memories when we see debilitating disease. And these things have this intersection right in terms of the knowledge of understanding.
We have time, sadly, for only one more question. But
Well, with your subject group, is there any kind of hereditary, dietary, or in Bob's case, a preference of drink that connects everything?
The answer is no. We have not discovered a single subject out of all the ones that we've tested that have a brother, sister, mother, father, child that has the same ability. We even have studied a set of identical twins, one of whom has the ability and the other one does not. So we have no conclusions, although we do have a big study, genetic studies. We got a saliva sample from everybody, and we're looking at the genetic composition, but that's also slow stuff. No, the answer is we have no visible evidence to date that this is genetically tied. We just don't have that.
When you're having a few drinks, does this memory slow down, disappear?
Yeah, it doesn't disappear, but it's not as sharp. It's probably like most people, it's not as sharp. It takes me longer to, like if someone asked September 16th, 71, you know, it may take me like 20 seconds instead of 5 seconds.
But does it feel better?
It all depends on what the drink is.
Please join me in thanking.
One more. So as president, I have one more question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Bob, I'd like to know who the greatest all-time basketball player in your league is.
It was Otis Pookie.
Otis Pookie.
Who was 6'6". Now keep in mind that these players, not all of them, but once it's kind of like Field of Dreams maybe, or The Truman Show. There's a reality versus fiction. And when these players leave, Neil Bo Jagger wasn't one of them, but many of these players leave. When they leave Holland, they assume a real life identity. And Otis Pookie's real name is Michael Jordan.
Michael Jordan. Bob, Dr. McGaugh, thanks so much for coming. Great having you. Thank you so much for having us. And we have some time to hang out, so if you want to come up and say hello, please do.
So before you leave, I just want to once again thank our wonderful speakers. And you guys are hearing them after we already brought them to the students at SMC. So that is the caliber of speakers that we're bringing to the SMC campus. And as you exit, we have wonderful, big, beautiful flyers and things that promote all the other wonderful events that are happening at the college. Please, in your events brochures, you get a little swag bag on your way out. There's all sorts of great information with all these great lectures. So please join us in the good work we're doing. Write a check. We'll meet you on the way out. Fill out one of these and join the good work. Damien, take it away.
Thank you, guys. Have a great night. Thank you very much.